of the Satam, certainly one senses the great potency and so automatically attains to the devotional stage of life. As already described, Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee of the Lord from his very birth, and so was Shukadev Goswami. Both of them were on the same level. Although it appears that Maharaj Parikshit was a great king accustomed to royal facilities, whereas Shukadev Goswami was a typical renouncer of the world, so much so that he did not even put cloth on his own body. Superficially, Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami might seem to be opposites, but basically they were both unalloyed, pure devotees of the Lord. When such devotees are assembled together, there can be no topics save discussions of the glory of the Lord, or Bhakti Yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita also, when there were talks between the Lord and his devotee Arjuna, there could not be any topic other than Bhakti Yoga. However, the mundane scholars may speculate on it in their own ways. The use of the word cha after Vayashakihi suggests, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, that both Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit were of the same category. Settled long before, although one was playing the part of the master and the other the disciple. Since Lord Krishna is the center of topics, the word Vasudeva Parayanaha, or devotee of Vasudeva, suggests devotee of Lord Krishna, the common aim. Although there were many others who assembled at the place where Maharaj Parikshit was fasting, the natural conclusion is that there was no topic other than the glorification of Lord Krishna, because the principal speaker was Shukadev Goswami, and the chief audience was Maharaj Parikshit. So Srimad Bhagavatam, as it was spoken and heard by two principal devotees of the Lord, is only for the glorification of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. Om Jnana Taramdasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshuyunmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Radhave Goswami Namane Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharye Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasvichari Sudharne Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda. So Guru Maharaj, if you would like to speak anything on this verse, you're more than welcome.
The example is given that if you have an association of persons who are of the same type, for example, businessmen, you have a businessman association and they get together, then the question, what did they discuss? It goes without saying they discuss business because they're businessmen. That's what they would discuss. And similarly, because Shukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj are both pure unalloyed devotees of the Krishna, no question of what they discussed. The discussion would have to be on the topic of Krishna because that was what they were absorbed in all the time. And that's why this movement has been created, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, to bring about Krishna consciousness in members who want to associate, and to give others a chance to associate with such devotees. And their discussions will be very potent because they're both pure devotees. If someone is not a pure devotee, if he is kind of mixed, some devotee of Krishna, some devotee of demigods, some devotee of something else, this, that, then it will not have the same effect. Avaishnavam akodgyanam bhutam harikatamitam kavanam navakartavyam sarpuchistaham vitapaya. Those who are not devotees of Krishna, if they do speak about Krishna, it won't be desirable to hear. It won't be favorable. It'll be unfavorable because milk touched by the lips of the serpent has poisonous effects. There are two classes of men in the world, devotees and non-devotees, or asuras and devas. Devatas, sura, asura. Devotees and non-devotees. So if someone is a devotee, then he can speak about Krishna. He can speak about God. Otherwise, if someone's not a devotee, and not devotee may include the impersonalists also. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was giving his explanation of what is a devotee. Asatsanga Tyaga E Vaishnava Achar. One should associate. What is it? The question was asked to Lord Chaitanya, what is a devotee? What are the characteristics of a devotee? His answer was, a devotee of Krishna is one who doesn't associate with non-devotees or with people who are too much attached to material sense gratification. He gives up their association. If one wants to be a pure devotee, he has to give up the association of non-devotees. For example, men who are attached to women, that's as dangerous as associating with a woman for a person who wants to reach the perfection of life. It's very dangerous to associate with those of the opposite sex who are filled with material desires. Then he'll very easily lose his status, his stature in devotional service. Or even if he associates with another man who's of the same mood, who's thinking and absorbed in sense gratification. It's like when you associate with someone with a disease. Is it a disease that can be transmitted from one person to another? Then if you eat with them, if you talk with them, you sit with them and everything close, then there's a very good chance you'll get the disease. In a positive way, similarly, if one associates with someone who has the disease, so to speak, of Krishna consciousness, he's a lover of Krishna. Parayana, this word means attached to. We hear it a lot. Pasude Parayana, Narayana Para Sarvenu Katashanu. This means those who are attached to Krishna Parayana, Narayan Parayana, they're attached to Krishna. So such a person is rare in this world. Bhagavad Gita says, Manushanam sahasreshu kaschid yati siddhaye atatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvata. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in fact. Hardly one becomes a devotee of Krishna. It's so rare. It's like we see in the world, there's several billion people, but most of them are just interested in the activities of that are on the same level as the animals. Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's their only interest. It's very rare to find one who's really interested in getting out of the material world, solving the problems of material life. They just say, well, you can't solve the problems. It's just part of life. You just have to accept it and make the best use of it. It's very rare to find someone who's willing to sacrifice his time and energy for getting free from the entanglement of birth and death, old age, and disease. Very rare. So most of those who are willing to try for that are interested in just merging into the Brahman or becoming one with the Supreme. They're not interested in serving God, but they're interested in perhaps becoming God. They think there's some way they can merge and become God. So it's rare out of so many millions of people, and then one becomes interested in self-realization on any level. And then of those, most of them are impersonalists. So only one is a devotee of Krishna. It's very rare. But we see the effect of what one pure devotee can do. He can liberate a whole universe. All the souls in the universe can be liberated by the presence of one devotee. Just like stars in the sky, there may be thousands of stars, and they're interesting to look at. But as far as giving light at nighttime, the full moon, if there's only one in the sky, it lights up the whole sky. So pure devotee is compared to that. Therefore, every spiritual master is thinking, if I'm able to somehow or other train my disciples, at least one to become a pure devotee, and he'll be like the moon that lights up the night in the firmament. So we should try to associate with such pure devotees as Shukadeva Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj. Doesn't matter whether they're householder, Grihetako, Vanitako, Siddhahari, Bolo Dako, whether they live in the forest as renouncers or they live in the palace as kings. Doesn't matter. If they're absorbed in Krishna's service, hearing and chanting about Krishna, their association is desirable.
Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj. So, oftentimes we may judge a devotee based on some type of externals that we're observing, whereas this is a great mistake because a few reasons. One, we know that devotees they actually sometimes are quite brave, meaning it's very hard to actually know where their heart is. And another reason it's a mistake is that the only way to actually judge a devotee is according to his heart, where he's situated on devotional service, how much he's actually giving to the Lord. And it's very, very difficult to see this in other devotees unless you are given some very, very intimate association. But like I said, even then, um, it's often difficult to tell. So it's best when we see a devotee to, pay our humble obeisances and respect, because it's very difficult to tell where he's actually situated. And as being mentioned, both of the parties involved, Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, they were in the same category. They were both pure devotees of the Lord, situated at the highest platform. So as Maharaj was mentioning, all that was being discussed was the glories of the Lord, because the devotees, they get great transcendental bliss and they relish the topics of Lord Krishna. And surely there is nothing else discussed. So something that comes to mind while reading this is there's many different external qualities of a devotee, and they come in all shapes and sizes. And as we are given the example in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, there was a great devotee, Golavecha Sridhar, who he was very, very simple man. He was a banana cup leaf salesman. He would make plates and different banana cups like that. And, he didn't possess anything for himself. He just had one simple piece of cloth. He had basically nothing. He had a little hut, and sometimes it's described that there'd be leaks in the hut, and the rain would come in, and he would just have to tolerate it or patch it up with some banana leaves. He had to tolerate so many different things. He didn't have anything, but internally he was completely devoted to the Lord. The only thing you could say he really had was he had a little job selling and making these banana leaves and cups. And half of what he earned from doing such a thing, he gave to the worship of Mother Ganga. And the other half, he humbly maintained his body. And even then, he would beg for his alms. And oftentimes, he wouldn't have any food to eat at all. So he would stay up, usually at night, chanting the Lord's holy names very loudly. And he would be chanting Hare Krishna in the middle of the night very loudly. And the neighbors would be yelling at him, Sridhar, be quiet. We know you're hungry. Your stomach is just crying out for food. So that's why you're yelling, So the neighbors would sometimes maybe throw a squash at him or something and say, Sridhar, eat this. And even then he would just, continue his chanting throughout the night. And they were just thinking, he's just hungry and poor. He's disturbed or what it be. So it's described in Mahaprakash Lila, where Lord Chaitanya, he reveals himself actually as the Supreme Lord. Because, he kept this as a secret to most everyone that he was God, because few reasons, but primarily because during that time, there were so many people saying, you practice this yoga system and you chant these mantras and you become God. Your consciousness raises to that of God and you become him. So what's it said is these people, they were surreptitiously, preaching false things about becoming God. So Lord Chaitanya, one of the reasons he came was, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi. He was stopping this Mayavad philosophy. So this is one of the ways he wasn't ever really claiming to be God. And in this Mahaprakash Lila, it's described there was a 21-hour ecstasy where Lord Chaitanya, he was up on a throne and he took the mood of God amongst his devotees. And he was praising his devotees as the Lord likes to do. And he was saying, please take this benediction, trying to give out, thank yous for his devotees, So all of the devotees, they were so humble. They were saying, I don't want anything but your devotional service. Or can you please give my daughter or my mother or my father devotional service? The devotees, they didn't really want anything for themselves, but bhakti. And, the Lord would say, surely, let me give you something. So like this, the devotee is such a humble attitude in that environment, and they were able to render service to him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this Leela. And towards the end of the Leela, this is a very long Leela, is described. There's hundreds of verses actually describing this Leela. It's very nectar, one of my most relished pastimes I like to hear. And towards the end of this, Sridhar, the banana leaf cup salesman, the Lord said, go call for Sridhar. And, the devotees amongst the assembly, who's Sridhar? Said, just go in that direction. He pointed over there and said, call out for Sridhar. So they yelled, Sridhar! And surely he comes up with his torn one cloth, very humble and submissive. And the Lord says, once Sridhar could see that he's actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he fainted and he went into an ecstatic trance of, unconsciousness, because he could see that Mahaprabhu, he would come and visit Sridhar every day to buy his leaf cups and to chastise him a bit, because he would say, Sridhar, this is a very nice leaf cup. How much do you want for it? And Sridhar would give him a very fair price. It was known that he would always give the right price for all the brahmanas. He would never inflate it at all, just enough. And Mahaprabhu would often say, you're cheating the brahmanas. What's wrong with you? This is way too expensive to be paying for these leaf cups. And he'd say, no, I'm not. And the Lord would say, yes, you are. And we know that you have a great wealth hidden somewhere in your house. It's like, no, this is who I am. I swear, you can come and look. You can come and look and check my house out. This is all I have. This is who I am. I'm being true. So like this, the Lord would go every day to purchase leaf cups and check them out. And sometimes, the Lord he would say, this is too expensive. I'm just going to take this. Today you give me charity. Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. So like this, the Lord, had this loving relationship with his devotee. And once Sridhar saw in this Leela that this is non-different than the Supreme Lord, he was totally bewildered. So the Lord thought, I'm going to repay my devotee. Let me give him some kind of benediction. And Sridhar, he wasn't having it. The Lord said, I can give you great wealth. Sridhar said, no. He said, I can give you a nice wife. No, I'm okay. I can give you a planet. You want a planet? I can give you a nice island. I can give you whatever you like, Sridhar. Please just take a benediction from me. He said, Lord, why are you harassing me? You're bothering me. I'm content. I'm totally satisfied. I don't, what do I need? Why do I need all these complexities in my life? He's content with very, very little. The epitome of Vairagya. As we learn, Mahaprabhu instructed through, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, Vairagya, Vidya, Nija, Bhakti Yoga. This renunciation, it's the heart of the Vaishnavas. But real renunciation, it's often mistaken to be just giving something up or not doing something. When in reality, it's accepting things that are favorable for devotional service and rejecting things that are unfavorable, as we know. So Sridhar, he was content with only what was favorable to serve. Whereas in comparison, because there's a comparison made of these two great devotees in the purport, in comparison to Sridhar, there was another great devotee, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, and he had so much opulence, so much luxury. When Gadadhar Pandit, he went with Mukunda to go see him. And Lord Chaitanya, he heard that he was now in Navadvip, and Lord Chaitanya said, you should go and see this great devotee. So Mukunda took Gadadhar, and Mukunda knew the glories, and Gadadhar didn't quite. He heard that he's a devotee, but he didn't quite understand. So they went in his presence, and Gadadhar was externally looking at all of these things. He had very nice curtains in his house, luxurious carpets, potted plants and flowers everywhere. He was chewing betel. He had nice combed hair and greased hair, and he had a mirror, it was described, that was, within his viewing, and he would often look over while he was chewing betel with his lips stained red, and he would just smile. He had these nice, beautiful earrings and luxurious clothing. He had all this luxury. And when Gadadhar Pandit saw him, he was thinking, what kind of devotee is this? This looks like some gross materialist. So Mukunda, he said, well, watch this. And he recited a verse about Putana, the witch Putana, and how she smeared poison on her breast, and Krishna, as a baby, sucked her breast and sucked the milk too, and sucked her life right out of her. And in this way, Putana, she attained what's said the same liberation, or very close to the same level of liberation as Mother Yashoda. So Mukunda, he recited this verse in front of Pundarik Vidyanidhi, and Pundarik Vidyanidhi just lost it. He started breaking things, all the pots strewed everywhere, all of his fancy clothes. He started like ripping off. His hair was all messed up. He was breaking the mirror, and there was food plates. He was just tipping them over and just strewing a mess all over the place. And then Gadadhar Pandit, he thought, I made a great offense, thinking he's a materialist. He thought, what have I done? So he expressed his desire to obtain initiation from Pundarik Vidyanidhi. And when it was brought up, he said, Pundarik Vidyanidhi said, oh, I'm so fortunate. A pure devotee such as Gadadhar Pandit wants to take initiation from me. This is my great fortune. Like Maharaj was saying, it's so rare that we come to the platform of devotional service. It's so rare that we even get this human birth. That's incredibly rare. Yet we get the human birth and we take to devotional service, and we're moving in a direction where we want to render pure devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is incredibly rare. There's a verse that I was hearing yesterday, describing the glories of the month of Kartik, and it was saying that how rare it actually is. It was giving some comparisons in this way, and it was being mentioned this human birth is incredibly rare. What's to say observing Kartik? It's minuscule. And then what's to say of coming to a platform where you're serving Krishna all the time? That's even smaller. And then the pure devotees, it's such a small percent. So in this comparison, we can see that any externals, these devotees of Mahaprabhu, they were both on the pure platform, on the pure level. Yet, externally, two different total manifestations. And there's so many different mixes in between. These are just two extremes to highlight, that we cannot judge externals. There's so many mixes of different types of devotees and different moods throughout this movement. And a lot of times we are just confined to our home program or our temple that we reside at. And actually, we don't actually get a lot of association with other devotees outside of, the internet or classes like that. So sometimes it's hard to understand, there's so many different moods, and these moods, they're all unique and special to Krishna. And variety is the spice of life. It's the same for devotional service. If you're just beating on the drum, the same beat over and over, and the same melody in the kirtan, that's okay. You're chanting the holy name, and that's great. But from one point of view, that's outstanding. From another point of view, if you're having the Lord over for lunch, are you going to serve him, white rice that doesn't have salt or pepper or butter every single day? Probably not. variety is it's a spice of life, and Krishna, he likes variety. That's why he wants so many devotees to come and serve him, because we all have individual things that we can offer him that no one else can. So, in devotional service, there should be so much transcendental variety. And it changes in whatever mood that you're grateful enough to observe, and whatever temple that you're blessed to stay at. You get a certain amount of variety, but it's not ending. There's unlimited variety all over the movement. And so we can see that we can't judge by the externals. It's just the heart. Some devotee, he could be playing the same beat over and over and chanting the same melody over and over, and he could be doing it with such sincerity that it could be very, very pleasing to the Lord. Or that devotee could be, doing it more or less like a robot without any love or feeling, just because he has to, and the Lord will see that that's the reason. Whereas things could look very, very opulent, and things could be done very, very well, but the intention may not be out of love. It may be tinged with some material motives, or, something for myself. So the motive is not as pure, and therefore on a transcendental platform, it may not manifest the same level of love in that devotee, just because he can render some opulence in his service. So the heart is what matters when we're serving. The mood, the internal mood. So it looks like we're just about out of time. Does anyone have any questions or comments for these topics that were brought up today? Okay, thank you for kindly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to